We should keep in mind that Mill does not think this is a good objection, but he realizes that ever since people have proposed moral theories where the right action seems to be based on what produces pleasure, people have been skeptical. People thought this is a problem, that the life of a pig is the ideal life, which is exactly what the objection is that we're looking at, and the argument is based on that we're currently looking at. Now, Mill raises this not because he thinks it's devastating, but rather he wants to address it right up front with his audience and say, this might be coming to your mind, but this is not a good objection. So we'll now turn to how he responds to this objection. And the first thing we should note about it is that this is really a telling objection against Bentham's version of utilitarianism. And this is where Mill believes, and I think correctly so, that he has improved on it. And the concept that he has, if you read the next section right after he defines utilitarianism, he talks about high and low high and low pleasures, higher and lower pleasures. Now, when Bentham is thinking about it, when we're thinking about it, and when we were thinking about with the example of the woman leaving the money to one of her two nephews, pleasure and pain were just measured in how intense the pleasure was and how long it lasted, how much times how long. But Mill is suggesting in his section on higher and lower pleasures that pleasure and pain are measured in three dimensions: quality, which we haven't spoken about so far, intensity, and duration. That is, how good a quality is, so there's a quality factor, times how intense the pleasure is, times how long. And Mill is indicating that certain pleasures are of high quality and certain pleasures are of low quality. Low quality being the one that the pigs, the swine, would be interested in, merely the bodily pleasures. And he points out that there are pleasures of, you might say, the intellectual pleasures or the moral pleasures he talks about. That is, you might think of reading a book, learning something, gaining knowledge, going to a museum, appreciating the art, the pleasure of being charitable, giving charity. That these are high quality pleasures as opposed to bodily pleasures, things that a great tasting meal, a good cigar, if you like cigars, great sex. Those are what he calls the low quality pleasures. And if you think about it, now what he's suggesting is, if we look at the example that we're talking about, or let's look at the matrix that we kind of were putting together in trying to do our calculation utility, if we look at the two actions, leaving the money to the sex, drugs, rock and roll nephew versus the benevolent one, here's the way it would make more sense according to Mill, or here's the way you have to factor everything in. That is, when we're thinking of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll nephew, the pleasure is, well, there's a lot of it. It's all low quality, and maybe it lasts a long time, but it's low quality. If you think about low quality, maybe it's you multiply that by a factor of 1, or you only consider a tenth of it because it's such low quality. Now, in terms of pain, that guy doesn't experience a lot of pain because the way we described him, he just continues partying on the next day. Doesn't even have time to have a hangover. In looking at the benevolent medical student nephew, or leaving the money to that one, that individual, that nephew, is going to produce consequences that have a significant amount of high quality consequences. His studies are going to be very high quality. He's going to, even though they're going to be somewhat frustrating, they're going to be he's going to have a lot of high quality pleasure, and there's going to be some low quality pleasure maybe not lasting for a long time. Or imagine that he becomes an oncologist, a doctor treating cancer, terminal cancer patients. There's going to be a lot of satisfaction in helping them out, but there's going to be a lot of low level, low quality pain. But these higher quality pains of beneficence and charity to his patients, there are such a high quality. Let's say it's a factor of 1,000 that we have to multiply that by, which means that in calculating our utility, he is the one that's going to end up having the highest utility, or leaving the money to him will be the act ending up in having the highest utility. And that's why that is the right thing to do, even according to act utilitarianism, at least according to Mill. So that's how he clarifies his theory. So we see the doctrine of swine is really not an issue for his version of utilitarianism.